She begged me to stay, but it was too late. I realized she'd already let go first. The train slowed as it curved along the coastline, the windows fogged with the chill of early evening. Outside, the sea stretched endlessly, gray, restless, familiar. I hadn't been back in years, but the air still smelled like salt and burnt coffee, like the same mornings we used to steal before the world woke up. When the station came into view, my heart thudded in a rhythm that felt both foreign and remembered. Everything looked smaller, the streets, the houses, even the sky. Maybe it was me who'd grown too far away. I told myself this trip was just for a few days. Just to clear my head, maybe see some old places. But deep down, I knew what pulled me here wasn't nostalgia. It was her, Elena. She was never the kind of woman you forget. There was something about the way she moved through a room, quiet, composed, like every motion was a thought she'd already weighed. I used to think she was untouchable. Then she proved me right, the day she left without goodbye. I walked through town that evening, hands buried in my jacket pockets, pretending I wasn't searching. The wind carried the sound of gulls, the soft hum of life going on without me. When I reached the old cafe, her cafe, my chest tightened. The sign was different now, repainted, but the big front window was the same. That's when I saw her. Sitting alone by the window, a cup of tea untouched in front of her, eyes on a book she wasn't really reading. The years had touched her gently, silver threads in her dark hair, a softer stillness in her face. She looked older, yes, but also freer. Like someone who'd finally made peace with something, even if that peace had a cost. Our eyes met through the glass, just for a second. But in that second, every wall I'd built cracked. The world around her blurred. It was just her eyes, warm, startled, unsure, like she wasn't expecting ghosts to show up before sunset. I didn't wave. Didn't smile. I just looked, long enough for her to know I'd seen her, long enough for the air to thicken between us again. Then I walked on. Each step away felt like dragging a memory through gravel. I could almost hear her voice, calm, measured, the way she used to say my name when she wanted me to stay but wouldn't ask outright. When I reached the corner, I turned once more. She was still there, staring at the door, as if waiting for someone to walk back through it. In the voiceover, his tone softens, not bitter, just tired. It's strange, how some faces stop belonging to your past the moment you see them again. Maybe time doesn't heal everything. Maybe it just teaches you how to hide the ache. As the screen fades to black, soft piano notes linger, a quiet promise that this story isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering what love leaves behind. The next morning, the town was wrapped in that thin, golden light that makes everything look softer than it really is. I told myself I was just out for a walk, that I wasn't going back there. But my feet disagreed. They carried me down the cobblestone street, right to that same cafe window. And there she was again. Elena. Same table. Same quiet poise. Only this time, she noticed me first. She smiled, faint, uncertain, but real. A gesture so small, yet it sent something familiar racing through me. I hesitated in the doorway, the smell of roasted beans and warm pastries wrapping around me like memory. She waved lightly, almost shyly, as if inviting me to sit wasn't the boldest thing she could have done. So I did. Coffee? She asked, her voice as calm as ever, that low, smooth tone that once could undo me. Sure, I said, even though I didn't drink coffee anymore. We talked, about nothing that mattered. The weather. The town. The new owner of the bookstore. Every word was safe, polite. But beneath that safety was a quiet panic, like we both knew the first wrong word could bring the past crashing back. When the waiter brought our drinks, she pushed the sugar toward me, the same way she used to. Her fingers brushed mine, just slightly, unintentionally maybe, but my hand froze. That single touch, warm, steady, familiar, sent a ripple through me. I looked up. She was pretending not to notice, stirring her tea slowly, eyes fixed on the swirl of the spoon. You still take it bitter? She asked softly. Guess old habits die hard, I murmured. She smiled, that small, almost nostalgic curve of her lips. For a heartbeat, it felt like the years hadn't happened, like we were right back in those slow mornings when the world outside didn't matter. But time had its own gravity. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It was dense, full of words either of us dared to say. I studied her quietly. The fine lines around her eyes. The silver glint at her temples. The way she cradled her cup with both hands like it grounded her. She looked beautiful, not in the way that stops time, but in the way that reminds you how fragile it really is. "You look good," she said after a moment. Simple words, but her voice caught just slightly at the end, enough for me to notice. "So do you," I replied. "Different but good." She laughed, soft, disbelieving, a sound that cracked the tension just a little. "I thought you'd forgotten this place," she said. "I tried," I answered. "Some places don't let you." She looked at me then, directly. And in her gaze there was a flicker of everything unspoken, regret, longing, the faint spark of something still alive. When I left the cafe, my pulse wouldn't settle. I hadn't planned on seeing her again. But as the door closed behind me, I already knew I would. In the voiceover, the narrator's tone lowers, a quiet ache beneath the calm. Some conversations don't heal anything. They just reopen what time pretended to close. The screen fades out on a lingering shot, her at the window, watching him walk away, her hand resting on the same sugar jar his fingers touched. The sun had long dipped below the horizon by the time I found myself outside again. The cafe lights had dimmed to a warm amber glow, spilling onto the quiet street. I didn't expect to see her there, not again, not tonight. But when the door opened behind me and her voice, gentle as ever, said, "You're leaving already?" it was like the evening itself had exhaled her name. She stood in the doorway, cardigan pulled tight against the chill, her hair slightly tousled from the breeze. There was something disarming about how natural it felt, seeing her there, between light and shadow, like she'd always been part of this hour. "I thought I'd walk for a bit," I said, my voice softer than I intended. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Mind if I join?" And just like that, we were walking again, down the same streets we used to roam years ago, when silence between us was easy, not heavy. The air smelled of sea salt and wet leaves. The town was half asleep, shutters closed, lamps flickering, the sound of distant waves filling the spaces our words didn't. We talked, about small things at first. How the bakery still burned its croissants. How the old pier was finally being repaired. It was almost comical, two people circling the edges of a memory, too afraid to step into it. Every so often, our shoulders brushed. Every so often, I'd glance at her, how she folded her arms when she was unsure, how she tilted her head when she listened. I used to know every one of those gestures, used to read them like a language. Now they felt foreign and familiar at once. "You haven't changed much," she said suddenly. I laughed quietly. "That's not true. I just learned to hide it better." She smiled, but there was a sadness in it. "You were always terrible at hiding anything." We reached the pier. The wood creaked underfoot as we stepped out, the tide whispering against the pylons below. The air was cooler here, the kind that makes your breath visible, the kind of night where words feel heavier. She leaned on the railing, her eyes tracing the horizon. "Do you ever think about back then?" I wanted to lie. To say no. To pretend that time had erased her. But the truth sat heavy in my chest. "Every now and then," I said. "Mostly when it's quiet like this." She turned toward me, her hair catching the wind. For a moment, the years between us disappeared. My hand moved on instinct, a small gesture, careful, hesitant. I brushed a strand of hair from her face. My fingers grazed her temple, and she didn't pull away. Her eyes met mine, warm, searching, tired. So much said, none of it spoken. Then she looked away. "I should head home," she whispered. I nodded. "Yeah." We walked back slowly, not side by side this time, a few steps apart. Close enough to feel her warmth, far enough to know it wasn't ours anymore. Voiceover. Funny thing about distance, sometimes it's not measured in miles. Sometimes it's just a single step you're too afraid to close. As she turned the corner, the night swallowed her silhouette. And yet, the echo of her footsteps stayed, soft, steady, refusing to fade. The night deepened after she said she should go, but neither of us moved right away. The air carried that soft chill before rain, the kind that makes everything smell like memory. We lingered by the water, the waves folding into the shore with slow, rhythmic sighs. She sat down on the edge of the pier, legs crossed, hands clasped loosely around her knees. I joined her, keeping a respectful space between us. It wasn't distance, it was defense. For a while, we just listened, to the wind, to the sea, to the silence that had become our language. Her reflection shimmered in the water below, rippled by the tide, fragile and fleeting. "You still come here?" I said quietly. "Sometimes," she replied. "When I need to think, or forget. Depends on the day." I smiled faintly. "And tonight?" She looked at me then, her eyes soft but unreadable. "Tonight I don't know what I need." There was a long pause. The kind that feels like standing on a cliff's edge, knowing one word could send you both tumbling. Finally, she spoke again, barely above a whisper. "I shouldn't have left the way I did." Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, and I felt something tighten inside me. The honesty in her tone was raw, hesitant, as if she'd been carrying those words for years. "I told myself I was doing the right thing," she continued, staring at the horizon. "That walking away was better than watching it fall apart." I wanted to ask why. I wanted to demand the truth, the real reason behind the sudden silence, the unanswered messages, the years of wondering. But I couldn't. Because sitting beside her now, I could see the weight she'd been carrying. "You had your reasons," I said instead. She looked at me then, searching my face. "Do you hate me for it?" Her question hung in the air, trembling between guilt and hope. I swallowed hard. "No. I tried to once. But hate never stuck. It just turned into something quieter." Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something. Maybe sorry, maybe I miss you, but she didn't. Instead, she looked back at the sea, her eyes glistening with what she refused to let fall. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full. Full of everything we never said, everything we still felt. A gust of wind swept between us, carrying the scent of rain and salt. Without thinking, I reached out, my hand hovering close to hers, not touching, just close enough for her to feel the warmth. She didn't move away. For a moment, it felt like the world stopped, like all the noise in both our lives had gone quiet just to let this moment breathe. Then she stood abruptly, brushing her hands against her jeans, breaking the spell. "It's late," she said softly. "You should get home." And before I could respond, she was already walking toward the streetlights, her shadow stretching long and thin across the pier. Voiceover. Sometimes the hardest confessions aren't the ones we never hear, they're the ones we almost did. As she disappeared into the distance, I stayed there, the echo of her words still circling like the tide, never quite leaving, never fully arriving. The sky broke open not long after she left. By the time I started walking home, rain had already begun to fall, soft at first, then heavier, until the streets shimmered beneath the streetlights. The kind of rain that feels personal, like it's trying to wash something off your skin that's buried far deeper. I pulled my jacket tighter, head down, but then I saw her again, just ahead, at the corner near her building, umbrella forgotten, face turned upward as if she'd given up on staying dry. Something about that sight, her stillness in the storm, made my chest ache. "Elena!" I called out. She turned slowly, eyes meeting mine through the curtain of rain. For a moment neither of us moved. Then she exhaled, almost like relief. "You followed me. Did I?" I said, forcing a small smile. "Or did you just stop where I'd find you?" Her lips curved into something between amusement and sadness. "Maybe both." We stood there under the downpour, water dripping from her hair, her cardigan clinging to her shoulders. The world around us had blurred, the traffic, the noise, the distance, it all disappeared. Only us, and everything we'd never said. I need to tell you something, she said suddenly. Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't waver. That day, when I left you, it wasn't because I stopped caring. I stayed quiet. Rain slid down my face, but it wasn't cold. She took a breath, steadying herself. I left because I thought it would save you. I was sick back then. I didn't want you to see me fall apart. I didn't want you to stay out of pity. The words hit like thunder, not loud, but deep. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. So you left, I said slowly, and let me believe I wasn't enough. Her eyes flickered. If I told you the truth, you would have stayed. Of course I would have stayed, I snapped, voice sharper than I meant. That's what love does, Elena. It stays. The rain poured harder now, soaking us both, but neither of us moved. Her chin trembled slightly as she whispered, I thought I was protecting you. I stepped closer, just one small step, close enough to see the way her mascara bled into the corners of her eyes, how her breath trembled between words. You didn't save me, I said softly. You just left me searching for someone who felt like home. And it was always you. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. The truth hung there between us, heavy, real, irreversible. For the first time in years, she reached out. Her hand brushed against my chest, resting over my heartbeat. The touch was light, tentative, but it anchored us both. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know, I said. I've always known. Neither of us said another word. The rain fell harder, the world muted around us. All that existed was that fragile space, her hand on my chest, my breath against her forehead, the sound of everything breaking and healing at once. Voiceover. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It just makes you see why you couldn't leave in the first place. The camera would fade out slowly, two blurred silhouettes in the rain, motionless, held together not by forgiveness, but by the ache that made it possible. Morning came slow, gray light filtering through thin curtains, the kind that makes everything look softer, even sadness. The storm had passed, but the streets outside still glistened with last night's rain, puddles reflecting pieces of a wash-clean sky. I hadn't slept. I just sat there by the window of the small apartment I'd rented, watching the world move on while my thoughts stayed caught in her voice. I'm sorry. Those two words had replayed in my mind all night, looping between relief and ache. I was supposed to leave today. I had told myself that before coming here, no matter what happened, I wouldn't stay. Some places carry too many ghosts to live in them again. The suitcase was packed. The train ticket waited on the table. But my chest still felt heavy, like something unfinished was holding me in place. At the station, the air smelled faintly of metal and coffee. People moved quickly, luggage wheels clattering on the tiles, voices blending into the hum of departure. Everything around me was alive, but I felt suspended, half in the present, half in a past I never fully left. Then I heard her. Wait. That one word, quiet but urgent, cut through everything. I turned, and there she was, hair still damp from the morning air, breathing hard like she'd been running. She looked different in daylight, raw, unguarded, eyes shining not with confidence but with something far more fragile, hope. Please, she said, catching her breath. Don't go. The words trembled, not from weakness but from meaning. It wasn't a command, it was a plea stripped of pride. For a second, I almost said yes. Almost dropped the bag, almost closed the distance between us. But then I saw the truth in her eyes, the regret, the timing, the years we'd lost. And I knew that love sometimes comes back too late to stay. I took a slow breath. You already did first. The sentence hung in the air, quiet but final, not out of anger, but out of honesty. Her face broke, just slightly. The corners of her mouth trembled, her eyes glassed over. She nodded, as if she'd been expecting it but still wished for a different ending. I stepped closer, close enough to see the tiny raindrops still clinging to her lashes. My hand lifted on instinct, brushing a tear that escaped down her cheek. Hey! I whispered, my thumb tracing gently along her skin. I forgave you long before today. Her eyes closed at that, maybe to hold back more tears, maybe to feel what words couldn't carry. Then the train whistle cut through the quiet, long, low final. I let my hand fall away, and she opened her eyes again, giving me the faintest smile, the kind that says thank you and goodbye at the same time. Voiceover. Some love doesn't end with leaving. It ends when both hearts finally stop running. As the doors closed, the camera lingers, her standing alone on the platform, rain beginning again, small and steady. She doesn't chase the train. She just stands there, watching it fade, a soft smile through the tears, the kind that comes when goodbye finally feels like peace. The train moved slow through the countryside, slicing through fog and fields that looked half asleep beneath the morning light. I sat by the window, forehead resting against the glass, watching the world drift backward. Every mile felt like a memory unspooling, pieces of the town, the cafe, the pier, all fading into the distance. It wasn't sadness that lingered. Not anymore. Just a soft ache, the kind that reminds you something mattered deeply. Her face kept flashing through my mind, not the way she looked when she left, or even when she asked me to stay, but the quiet moment after, when she smiled through tears. That image stayed with me more than any goodbye. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folded letter I'd left behind at the cafe that morning, tucked beneath her favorite book on the windowsill. A letter she'd find later, maybe when she wasn't looking for it. I hadn't written it to change her mind. I'd written it so she'd know that some things don't need fixing to be forgiven. Elena, it began. I used to think love meant always holding on. Now I think maybe it's knowing when to let go, gently, without resentment. You didn't ruin what we had. You just ended it in a way I couldn't understand then. But I do now. What we shared wasn't broken. It just found its ending before we did. I smiled faintly as I imagined her reading it, her fingers tracing the words, her lips curling into that soft, reflective smile she always tried to hide. Outside, the clouds began to lift. The sea appeared again in flashes between the hills, the same sea that had carried our memories, our silence, our second chances. It looked calmer now, as if it too had exhaled. The train hummed gently beneath me, steady and rhythmic. I leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment. Voiceover. I used to think closure came from answers, from knowing why someone left, or how they felt, or if they'd ever think of you again. But maybe closure isn't something you get. Maybe it's something you give, to yourself. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight had broken through the clouds, painting everything in gold. The world looked new, as if forgiveness had a color. Back in town, I imagined her sitting at that cafe window, cup of tea in hand, letter beside her, her eyes soft with the kind of peace that comes after storms. Maybe she'd smile. Maybe she'd whisper something to herself, not goodbye, not regret, just a quiet thank you. The camera would linger there, her profile framed by morning light, the sea glinting behind her. Then the narrator's final line, soft and steady. Some loves don't need to last forever to mean forever. Some just need to be remembered, gently. The music fades, piano, low and tender, as the screen dissolves into the golden horizon. No reunion. No bitterness. Just the quiet kind of ending that feels like healing.